Mussar Shlita, Rabbi Yedidim, dear friends, new and old. Just want to express Hakarsa Tov to the yeshiva for affording me this opportunity. I look around just to spend a few minutes with you guys. Chaverim Makshivim, how special it is. Especially because even though most of you I don't see on a regular basis, but I've been a part of this yeshiva. I've been a Talmud of our Rabbi since I arrived here as a kid in 1999. It's a little time. So even after having gone to Chicago and learning from a distance, this is our base medrash, even in Chicago. We're just a satellite of our yeshiva, and what a great zchus it is to be back to learn with you, Chaverim Makshivim. We're all just trying to grow in our avodas Hashem and to share a few thoughts that maybe will resonate wherever you are in your journey in avodas Hashem, in Ruchnius. In English, there's an expression that a person can be of two minds. And this expresses perhaps a deep truth of Yadus, because we also have the concept of minds. There's a term, it appears in the Zohar HaKadosh and in many later Sfarim, it's called mohin. Mohin literally means minds. And there are two mohin that many of the Sfarim talk about. One is called mohin de katniss, and the other is called mohin de Godless. And that's what I'd like to explore together with you guys tonight. How would you describe, how would you characterize mohin de katniss? Literally means smallness of mind. If you thought about it in musical terms, it would be a minor key. It's an affect of being constricted or burnt out or uninspired. You could call it Hester Pani. It's mohin de katniss. What's mohin de Godless? Is when a person feels that they're uplifted. They're living in a musical major key. We feel a sense of maybe what psychologists would call flow, expansiveness, dvekus, feeling connected. And we all experience an oscillation between mohin de katniss and mohin de Godless at times in our life. And yet, many of us together in this base medrash experience at times a problem. The problem is because the Gemara says in Brachos, as you guys know very well, the Gemara says, Sarach sheyachavein raglo, the person, when we daven Shemon Esrei, when we stand in this room and we speak to the Ribbono Shalom one-on-one, we have to be machavein raglo. So there is a dispute in the Talmud Yerushalmi how to interpret that, but we say, like it follows in the Bavli, that we have to keep our feet together. Why do you keep your feet together? Because it says in Pasuk, "V'ragleihem regel yeshar," that malachim, they appear kiviyachol with 1 foot. And because they appear with 1 foot, when we come to the Ribbono Shalom, we approach the Borei Olam for our conversation like malachim. So we also have 1 foot. And this is exactly what it says in Shulchan Aruch and Orach Chaim, Siman Tzadi Hey Sif Aleph. We keep our feet together. Everyone knows this. Lehidamos l'malachim. The problem that we feel sometimes is that we put our feet together and we say we're ready to have a conversation with the Borei Olam, and we're not quite sure that we feel like malachim. Are we really malachim? Have we been like malachim? If we experience periods of mohindi katniss, of feeling distant or down or constricted or uninspired, and then we show up to daven Shemona Esrei, there's a little bit of a cognitive dissonance. Sometimes maybe somebody had the experience, somehow it worked out that they started at 5 o'clock and they finished at 9 o'clock. They were the English term for this, I believe, is binging Netflix. Such a thing. It's like kfitzas haderech in zman. You start at one time and then you finish at another time, and you're not sure how the time elapsed. You know, you've heard such a thing. So after that, you kind of pull yourself out of the couch cushions and you go with this. You got to daven Ma'ariv. So how do we feel davening Ma'ariv, Ragleim, Regel Yishar? We're going to go talk to the Bon Shalom after where we've been. And maybe B'chlal, maybe we're not in the mood to daven Ma'ariv. And maybe the 3 times that we daven Ma'ariv, the last 3 days, it's been, literally, they say an expression, davening it up, just saying the words totally flat, uninspired. So there's a problem here. Because we're pretending to be malachim, but we're not. And it's compounded even more when we have the zchus, the incredible zchus to be here in yeshiva. The Gemara says in Maseches Horayos at the end of the Gemara, you should look at the mouth, at the face of your Rebbe. Why? Based on the pasuk in Yeshaya, v'hayu einecha ros esmorecha. What does the Gemara say in Moikatan? Many of you know. Im dome harav l'malach Hashem tevakish Torah mipihu. Based on the pasuk, if your Rebbe is like a malach Hashem tzvakos, you should learn Torah from such a Rebbe. It's amazing, but it also causes some problems. I could talk for a moment, because he's not here, about my Rebbe. For most of my time when I was here in YU, I had many Rabbeim, many mentors, many teachers, people who have literally formed my Torah personality. Rav Shechter was my chief Rebbe and still is. I don't know how many of you listened to Rav Shechter's hesped for his Rebbe, Rabbi Tendler, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, was my biology teacher. Not exactly, didn't really take biology. It took like medical ethics and it qualified a shtickle for biology. It worked out, bio for poets, it worked it out. If you listen to that hesped, did you notice that Rav Shechter described what Rabbi Tendler taught them in 9th grade? But not only that, and I'm not good with math. Everyone in the registrar's office knows I never even took a math class since 11th grade. Rav Shechter, it's not a secret, Zol Gesundsein and Stark is 80 years old. He was advanced at that time as a kid, so I think he was either 13 or 14 years old when he was in Rabbi Tendler's class. That means we're talking at least 66 years ago. And he said, yeah, we learned such and such a parak, and we learned all the Tosfos except this one. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what that even means. I don't remember what Masechta we learned 3 years ago on the call. I would have to open up my notes to figure it out. He remembers the Tosfos that they didn't learn in 9th grade. Did you ever watch Rav Shechter daven mincha? When we finished shir, we had the shir in the first hall, and he would daven mincha, and it was the most unbelievable thing because he said all the words. You could watch. I would watch. So a few years ago, our kollel brought Rav Shechter and the Rebbitzin to Chicago for a weekend. So it was great. We had shiur and programs and schools and everything. So I came up with a great chap. I knew he was going to be so happy about this. There's a particular school where the davening is so slow. It's so long. It's mamish long like the Godless. A regular Wednesday davening is like, it's longer than the main Beis Medrash davening here, like Pishnai. So I worked it out that we would bring Rav Shechter there for davening because I knew he would mamish love it. He would be able to say all the words and not be rushed and not have people chepping him to start Shmon Esrei. He would mamish love it. And for us, how many of us were like, we've got the phantom cell phone thing going on. Still Shmon Esrei, Chazar Sichas, we're like, we're getting answers because we didn't check. Like, we look at Rav Shechter and we're like, how does that make us feel? How do we deal with that? Even Bein Adam L'Chaveiro. When I was in the Shir, I kid you not, there was a guy, it was a little interesting, at least the rest of us would consider him interesting. Rav Shechter probably didn't think it was anything interesting. But we had to finish the Shir at 2:30. So this fellow was a little bit interesting, you could imagine. Rav Shechter didn't always finish the Shir at 2:30. Sometimes it went a little bit longer. Not like Rav Soloveitchik, not like 5 hours longer, but like a few minutes longer. So some guy, he brought an alarm clock. I'm not joking. He set an alarm clock. He sat in the second row. First of all, I would never sit in the second row. I sat in the 18th row. He sat in the second row and he had the alarm clock. And he set it for 2:30. And at 2:30 in the afternoon, it would buzz when Rav Shechter was in the middle of the sentence. And this went on for days. And in those days, there was no Shir assistant to tell the guy, like, that's not. So some good Samaritan had to come over to the guy and say, it's probably not possible for you to set an alarm clock for the end of the Shir. But you know what? It never bothered him. Did you notice how Rav Shechter was sitting in the front of the Beis Medrash? People would line up. Some guy would come over to him. God bless him. The guy would come up and say, Rabbi, I just used the washroom and I washed until Sedime. I don't remember. What bracha did we say after using the washroom? So Rav Shechter would look at me. This question. I think it says in Shulchan Aruch that we say Asher Yatzar. I think that's what it says in Shulchan Aruch. And I would say, oh, thank you so much, Rabbi. And he would go back to the whatever Daf Gemara. In the years that I had the opportunity, the unbelievable schus to be in the Shir or to be in their house, in the apartment, I only once ever saw Rav Shechter get upset. There was once a time, it was on Purim, unfortunately, there was a guy who came collecting tzedakah, and Rav Shechter, because of course, like many of our Rabbeim, he's a big tzaddik and he's extremely generous with tzedakah. And the guy came again, pretending like he hadn't come before. And then Rav Shechter was upset. He was upset. He said, there are so many needs. How could you come again? If you haven't had the opportunity to listen to Rav Shechter talk about Eretz Yisrael on Yom Ha'atzmaut or any other time, to think about what Eretz Yisrael means to a Jewish person, to a Ben Torah, to a Ben Aliyah, how could you not be moved by listening to Rav Shechter on Yom Ha'atzmaut? And then we look at ourselves, and where are we? And we can only pick on, like, I'll give you one small nakuda, but it's prevalent. It's the inyan of food. Food is a big thing in America. It's probably a multi-billion-dollar industry. There's the food channel, there's food magazines, I think there's multiple food channels. You can get every blogger with every food iteration, every kosher food vacations. It's a lot of discussions about food. And yet it's interesting. I once heard from the Heilige Stuchina Rebbe Shlita, Rav Maltel Silver, I once heard Rav Maltel made an offhand comment. He said, the tzaddikim, they didn't talk very much about food. But many of us, this is still occupying. I haven't been to a wedding at the marina probably in 15, 20 years. Maybe, do they still have the big giant onion rings? You know what I'm talking about at the shmort? Like, is this still what we're talking about? Recently, I had a little incident in my house. where I was talking with my wife and I made a not so flattering comment about the menu. The Shabbos meal. So the Baruch Shalom gave me a little tap on the head because Shabbos morning I woke up and I came downstairs in the kitchen. And as I was in the kitchen, I saw b'mo einai, something that never happened, lo hoya v'lo nivra, that the cholent pot with the cholent that I made for that Shabbos Suda, it went and it shorted the circuit. Ois cholent. Because the Rebbe was telling me, don't get so involved in the menu. You know what I'm saying? Like, the menu doesn't have to be your Indian. Why are you even thinking about the menu? How much time do we spend talking about the calf? What did they have at the calf? Were you at the calf? What was going on? Did they have sushi today? I don't know. Sushi, did they have sushi at the calf? What kind of sushi they had? Where are we sometimes? And then we stand in the base of Medrash and we see our Rabbi, and it's like, so what do we do now? How do we deal with this gap? Not just between us and our Rabbi, but between our katniss hamochen and Godless hamochen. So perhaps we can think of three different approaches to this issue. And the first is self-awareness. And on some level, acceptance. Who says this? The Rabbeinu Tam. The Rabbeinu Tam in the Sefer HaYashar. And it's expanded upon by the Shem Yishmuel in Parshas Vayikra and the Heiliger of Shlomo Bolvi in the first volume of the Alei Shur. The Rabbeinu Tam says that every person, we all have what they call Yemei Ava and Yemei Sinah. Days that we feel Godless hamochen, Yemei Ava, when we're inspired, when we're in it, and Yemei Sinah, days where it's difficult. So the first thing is to realize it's normal. It's okay. It's expected. That's number one. Stay in it because it's normal. Don't give it up just because you hit a period of katniss hamochen. Don't give up on yourself, even when we see such incredible role models. That's number one. Number two is that this idea, these concepts of katniss hamochen and Godless hamochen, they appear in another pasuk, in that same description in Sefer Yechezkel. In the same parak, in the first parak of Sefer Yechezkel, according to the Heilige Baal Shem, in many places, in Ozayin, and in the Toldos, in last week's Parashas Vayetze, and then in countless other Sfarim in the Olam HaChasidus afterwards. They connect these ideas of katniss hamochen and Godless hamochen, not to the pasuk of Raglei and Regel Yeshara, not to pasuk Zion, but to pasuk Yudalid. Yechezkel, when he sees the malachim, he says, "V'hachayos ratzo v'shov k'marei habazak." Ratzo v'shov. In the Olam HaChasidus, the concept of katniss hamochen and Godless hamochen is associated with ratzo v'shov, moving back and forth, oscillating between these two poles of when we're down and uninspired and flat and far from the Ribono Shel Olam and from ourselves, to when we're in it, when we're great, when we're at our best. What do we learn? That there are two kinds of malachim. There are malachim, like it says in Zechariah, that are omdim. They are fixed. They're tzaddikim. But then there are other kind of malachim that are ratzo v'shov. Even a malach could be a ratzo v'shov. V'hachayos, they have chiyas, they're alive. If a person is living, it means they're organically, spiritually organically, they're active. It means that sometimes we're going to be up, but sometimes we might be down. But not only is it expected and okay, like the Heilige Rabbi Tam, but it means we're still a malach. We're like the malachim of the chayos that are Ruts over Shov. And that we're not just surviving a day of Yemei Sinah to get to Yemei Ava. But even when a person is sitting in Morgue Lounge, eating Chinese, watching the Giants lose again, or the Jets, Lo Aleinu, a person can still see themselves as a malach of Ruts over Shov, that the person is doing a shlichus of the Ribono Shel Olam in this world. And so how I eat, it's also becoming of a malach. Even as I exist, the katniss hamochim, even when I'm uninspired, I'm still a malach. And then when I come before the Ribono Shel Olam, the regel yeshara, I'm coming as a malach that's Ruts over Shov. That's also a malach. And finally, perhaps the biggest opportunity when we think of Ruts over Shov, of katniss hamochim and Godless hamochim, is to realize a teaching that Rav Kook has in several places in his writings. When a person feels that they are destroyed, that they have damaged, become distant in ruchnius, Yeda, they should know, not that they should run away, not that they should abandon ship, that they should give up on themselves. Yeda shehigia lo hator lebniyas binyan chadash. Now is the time to turn a new page, to start something new. And not only that, yoser na leveniskav, even more exalted, even greater. V'yoser kayim mafur, more beautiful. Mimasha haya v'rishona. And therefore, what should we do? V'yischazek v'yisames b'tikun ma'isa v'dracha. So let's get going. Let's embrace the Godless hamochim that comes next. Elsewhere in his Pinkas, he writes, Davar yaduahu, it's a known thing. Sha'acharei avor hamayim ha'achurim, after the dirty or even filthy water, after it passes through, hamafachim mimakor mayim chayim novea, that bubbles up, Yavo hamayim hatzlulim vahazakim, will come the pure and clear water, shehim meshivin es hanefesh. When we feel katniss hamochim, Rav Kook tells us that it's actually an open door to turn a new page in Godless hamochim. And yes, while we are here, maybe we experience periods of katniss hamochim. Sometimes in our learning in Seder, we're tired, we're burnt out. Sometimes in davening, we're not understanding, we're falling asleep. Sometimes in secular classes, sometimes it's socially in the dorm, sometimes it's on the internet. All kinds of things we can experience katniss hamochim. But then we can take a step back and says Rav Kook, we can realize that after that water has gone under the bridge, we take a next step to the even greater heights of Mochim to Godless. And how many opportunities do we have here for Mochim to Godless? Some of them are on a huge scale, and they can start even with one guy. When I was here a few years ago, there were a couple of guys, and they realized that Taka, there was a big problem. There's a problem that needed to be addressed in Klal Yisrael, the Godless hamochim. We think about what are the issues that are confronting Jewish people and human beings in the Jewish community today. It was the issue of agunas, lo aleinu. So it started from a couple of guys who worked with Rav Shechter to start Oro, which I hope you're familiar with, this unbelievable Mussar, which thanks to them, hundreds of women are free from difficult situations. And it's also raised the awareness, bichlal, about the importance of a prenup, which I signed. And for those of you who are married, I hope you signed. And if you haven't you had gotten married, Hashem should bless you to find the Ezer Kenegdo Bismano and sign the prenup. Because a couple of you guys figured out that they can make a difference. But Godless Hamochin, who would think that if you guys sitting in morgue, we're going to make a huge dent, mamish, in a worldwide crisis. But because this makom, this yeshiva, is an incubator for Godless Hamochin, that can happen here. You guys could create the next Godless Hamochin project. But the truth is, it doesn't have to be a project that changes the world. You can find your own greatness. Sometimes in yeshiva, there's a little bit of a Godless Hamochin. I know now that, I think, right, they put different shiurim in different locations in the base medrash. Some are in here, some are in the old main. Is anybody in Muss? Somebody's in Muss? Anyone? Does that building still exist? Yes? No? Muss Hall? Rabbi Simon Packets? No? Yes. Okay. So maybe sometimes there's a little bit of Godless Hamochin. Oh, you know, that guy, he sits in that section of the base medrash. He's in that base medrash. You know, we say it very politely. You know, he's in the other shiur. The other shiur. So if you were sitting at a kitchen on a Friday night, would you sit next to the guy from there? Probably it's pasnish for me, you know, to sit next to the guy from that shiur. We can sometimes get a little bit, you know, there are guys here from MYP and IBC, the Hule, all the acronyms. So sometimes you can get a little bit, you know, he's in that series of letters, that alphabet. You know, so I don't know if we're really gonna, do I make room for that guy at my table in the caf? When we're here for Shabbos and there's a Tish Friday night, do I have the Godless Hamochin to say what an amazing yeshiva of diverse guys who are all trying? We're all just trying. Maybe I could make room for that guy, the Godless Hamochin, and not worry so much. He looked a little bit like Neo Misnagish for me. Maybe a little bit. You know, like, maybe it's not my taste, not my type. But a person of Godless Hamochin, you could realize that there's room for everybody. There was an unbelievable Adam Godel who built schools around the world, in Iran and Israel, all across the country. And he settled in Miami Beach. Rabbi Yochanan's wife, should live and be well, so Gesundheit, Shalita, he commented once that this man is responsible for the entire Torah life of Miami Beach, and you could argue all of South Florida. His name is Rabbi Alexander Sanders Gross, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. So somebody once came to Rabbi Gross, Zichron Livracha, after he had started the Hebrew Academy, and they were worried. They were nervous. Why were they nervous? Because some of the families that Rabbi Gross had brought into the Hebrew Academy, who had come from South America, who were eating chazir treif and knew nothing, now became Baalei Tshuva, and they were sending their kids. They were going to start a new school as an alternative to his school. They were nervous. Rabbi Gross, are you worried? I said, what do you mean, am I worried? How beautiful is it that more people are expanding Talmud Torah? A person of Godless Hamochin embraces others. We can do that right here in our own ecosystem, in our own microcosm of the world in yeshiva. And then even on the grandest scale, the greatest and this finally, the ultimate Godless Hamochin. What does the Rebbe Shalom want for the world? What's our destiny? Here's an opportunity at your stage in life to have conversations of Godless Hamochin. It doesn't mean that you can't talk about Godless Hamochin. One of the things that I'm so excited about being here in New York is the opportunity to reconnect with my Rabbi. So this afternoon, I had the opportunity to spend a few minutes with Rabbi Weinberger Shlita in his office. And what's the first thing we talked about? The traffic. You know how long it took me to get from LaGuardia to the 5 towns? It's the shooting Sachen what you have over here. It's crazy. So it's okay to talk about Godless Hamochin, I think. But you have Rabbeim here who you could talk to about Godless Hamochin, about what is the Rebbe Shalom looking for in the world. for Klal Yisrael, for each of us, and where do we fit into it? The Rebbe Shalom gave us today an opportunity to see literally the unfolding of the Geula before our very eyes. Is that part of our conversation? Are we thinking about that? What does the Rebbe Shalom want for us in the context of the larger Jewish community? Yes, this is a time in our lives, for those of you guys who are dating, it's good to have katniss conversations when you're dating. I can't give anybody advice about anything, and certainly not about dating. But we all experience life. You schmooze, you talk about things. But maybe as part of dating, what do we have an opportunity for? For Godless hamochin, for talking about what really matters in a relationship and in building a home. Where do we want to live? And why do we want to live there? What do we want to accomplish? What is the Rebbe Shalom looking for our family? Is our destiny in America serving the Jewish people in whatever capacity that is, whether it's making a minyan as the 10th guy to be there at 6:30 in the morning to make sure that there's a minyan? Or is it giving a daf yomi chabura? Or is it thinking about, wait a second, the Rebbe Shalom rolled out the red carpet with nefesh b'nefesh, and the future of Klal Yisrael, the center for the Jewish future, is not New York. The center for the Jewish future, although I'm certainly probably the most vocal spokesman and living embodiment of the center for the Jewish future, it's in Eretz Yisrael. It's in the future home of Mashiach Tzidkenu. It's in the state of Israel. How much is that part of our conversation? At our stage in life, when we're young at this age, yes, we are of two minds. We confront and we struggle at times with katniss hamochin. But we can remember, number one, that that's expected, it's normal, it's okay. That's Aleph. We can remember that number two, even b'katniss hamochin, we are malachim. We can stand before the Rebbe Shalom and say we are malachim or Ruts of the shows. And number three, we can realize that these katniss hamochin episodes are really challenges in life through which we grow and ultimately lead us to the opportunities for us to build godless hamochin in our lives. We should all be matzliach to continue together to be olam mila on this journey.